My name is Guillermo Penafiel, and I teach photography here at UWSP, and I've been teaching for about 26 years now. The show itself it's called Capitulos, and Capitulos means chapters. So what you see on the wall is work from very early on in my career, about 26, 27 years ago or so, a few pieces from there. And then they progress to my later work. And I have the last part of the show is work that I did in Scotland, and at the same time some work that I did with ruins in Mexico. My body of work was influenced by something that's called magic realism. This is the very, very, very beginning. It's a movement in literature, and that it does not quite fall into the category of fantasy, but what it does is it combines real images with kind of invented images or imagined images. And so having been exposed to that kind of literature, I was working on sort of like visual translation of those. So the main theme behind my work is my personal memories. And my personal memories are built in layers. Some I acquired many years ago, some I'm acquiring today, some I will acquire in the future, obviously. And then when we talk about memory, I talk about personal memory, cultural memory, and genetic memory. So my images are built up in layers that come from different time periods, and then they're all blended into one image that can only exist on the paper that you see on the wall, because it's somewhat anti-photographic. When we think of photography, we think of time, place, and an event. These come from different times, they come from different events, and they all combine into a non-event, something that can only happen on a piece of paper on the wall. As in my work, as you go back in time, the memories are less defined, so to some extent they become more magical. Now, less defined doesn't mean that they're less clear. It's just sometimes the memories get stronger, or they acquire a stronger meaning, even though the edges of the actual memory become fuzzy and kind of fade into the background. So sometimes, I believe that who we believe we are is, a good part of it is fiction. We selectively choose bits and pieces from our memories to build who we remember ourselves to be. So yes, the older memories, I would say, become a little bit more magical. My work is done in the traditional wet process. So when we think of photography today, most people think digital imaging. And this is done with film and paper and using photochemicals. And on top of that, I work with a format that's called 4x5, a big negative, 4 inches by 5 inches, using cameras like what you see in like the Batman movies, the big bellows cameras, that kind of primitive equipment. So what I do is I photograph using large pieces of film. I process the film, and then I take more than one piece of film, between 3 and 5 usually, and then I layer them and print them in the darkroom, again using the traditional wet process on photographic paper. And I print negatives that are wet, and I also put some stuff between the negatives sometimes. So what you're getting is you're unifying 3 layers visually onto just one layer. When the image is done, it feels like, to some extent, like somebody else made it. It is away from me. It's become its own thing, and I was some sort of a conduit to have it happen on paper. And every now and then you come across one where you step back and there's something, it resonates differently from others. And it happens to all performers. And if a jazz performer is listening to recordings of their work, they'll be like, that one night we were on point. That one night was really worth saving, kind of thing. So, and it's the same with visual artists, and it's the same with me in this case. So there are several pet pieces in here that are my pet pieces for different reasons, but they all fall in that category of they go way beyond what my expectations were at that point. I don't think, when you're asking of expectations from the artist and what happens with the public, I don't think any artist will ever say, well, I don't really care. That is never true. I mean, we may pretend that is true, but that is never true. We all want the audience to come up with something. The main thing that's going to happen with this show is that because it's labeled as a photography show, the expectation of people and what they think a college professor who teaches photography, their expectations may be very, very different from what they're going to see on the wall. So they expect probably beautiful landscapes, technically super clean images, and my images are not necessarily there. They're complicated and they're very technical, but they're not that kind of nice, clean, pristine aesthetic. So one of the things that I know will happen is that a lot of people are going to come in, they're going to look at the wall and they're going to say, what am I looking at? And that is a good thing. That is a good thing. Some people will look at the walls and say, this is going to be the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my life, and that's okay. But then there are other people who will come in with a certain idea and walk out having had their minds changed somewhat as to the possibilities of what photography can do, separate from the kind of the documentation aspect that we always see. So that is one of my expectations. I would like to have somebody walk through and come out, not necessarily understand, because I'm not sure that I understand my own work, but come out of the exhibit saying, you know, I was expecting one thing, I got another, but it was an interesting voyage, so to speak. One of the main functions of our gallery, and this is why it's important to have a gallery, is to share with our students. The faculty in this department are all working artists, but we don't necessarily show locally. And it's rather uncommon for us to see the work of our other colleagues, other than in invitations, postcards, etc., show announcements. We don't ever, not ever, but we don't very often get to see their work. So this is an interesting opportunity for me to share with my students, because they have not seen my work, and to reconnect with that notion that once an artist, always an artist, and that we keep making work.